So Black Friday has just begun. Somewhere in a quiet suburb, a woman clicks a button on her phone at 3:07 in the morning. A television, 70% off. She barely thinks about it. 2 days later, the box appears on her doorstep, wrapped in tape, undamaged, on time, cheaper than it has any right to be. She carries it inside, sets it next to the couch, and forgets the entire transaction ever happened. That's the version you see. That's the version everyone sees. A click, a box, a doorstep. It feels almost boring in how smoothly it works. But that single click, multiplied by roughly 200 million other clicks happening in the same 72-hour window, should, by every rule of logistics ever written, collapse the global supply chain into rubble. Warehouses should overflow. Trucks should run out of drivers. Ports should choke. Delivery networks should freeze. Entire retailers should default on their promises. And yet, year after year, the largest shopping event in human history somehow moves through the world's arteries without bursting them. The shelves stay stocked. The trucks keep rolling. The packages keep arriving. Prices keep dropping. Customers keep clicking. So the real question isn't why Black Friday exists. The real question is this: how does a system designed for ordinary demand absorb a wave of orders nearly 10 times its normal size without breaking? Because make no mistake, this shouldn't work. On paper, Black Friday should be a catastrophe. In practice, it's an engineering marvel most people will never see. To understand how the system survives, you have to understand what it's actually up against. On a normal Tuesday in November, the average American logistics network moves around 50 to 60 million parcels a day. During Black Friday week, that number can spike above 120 million parcels per day, sometimes higher. UPS alone has processed peak days above 40 million packages. FedEx crosses 22 million. The United States Postal Service pushes past 60 million. Amazon has hit more than 18.5 million items ordered in a single day, which comes out to roughly 214 items every second. 214 items every second for 24 hours. And that's only one company. Now imagine each of those items needs to be picked from a shelf, packed into a box, weighed, labeled, sorted, loaded, driven, flown, sorted again, loaded again, driven again, and placed on a specific doorstep, on a specific street, in a specific city, in a specific country, on a specific day. Multiply that by tens of millions of doorsteps. That's the scale we're talking about. That's what has to work perfectly, or almost perfectly, in a 4-day window. And here's what most people never realize. The retailers don't prepare for Black Friday in November. They start preparing in January, 10 full months earlier. Because the greatest trick in modern retail isn't the discount, it's the forecast. Every major retailer, from Walmart to Target to Amazon to Best Buy, runs enormous demand forecasting models throughout the entire year. These models ingest past sales data, weather patterns, economic indicators, social media trends, TikTok virality, celebrity endorsements, competitor pricing, currency movements, oil prices, and even geopolitical tension. They try to predict months in advance exactly how many air fryers, exactly how many televisions, exactly how many sweaters, exactly how many pairs of headphones will be sold on a Friday in late November. And they try to predict it down to the specific zip code. Because a supply chain doesn't fail from lack of products. It fails from products being in the wrong place. A pallet of TVs stuck in a warehouse in Kansas does nothing for a customer in New Jersey. So the retailer's real job, months before any discount is ever announced, is to redistribute inventory across the country in a shape that roughly matches where demand will explode. That means moving millions of units from central distribution centers into regional fulfillment centers, then into smaller delivery stations closer to cities. Then finally, into last-mile hubs that sit within 20 or 30 miles of the customer. This is called network positioning. And in the run-up to Black Friday, it becomes one of the largest coordinated inventory movements in the world. Amazon alone shifts more than 1 billion units into forward positions before the holiday season. Walmart moves entire container ships early, sometimes as early as July, to avoid the port congestion that historically peaks in October and November. And this is where the story gets stranger, because to make Black Friday possible, retailers begin ordering their Black Friday inventory almost a year in advance, straight from the factories in Vietnam, China, Bangladesh, India, and Mexico. A television being sold in November was likely assembled in June. A toy was likely produced in April. A winter jacket was likely stitched in February. The entire calendar of global manufacturing is silently bent around a single Friday in America. That's the first hidden layer. But the second layer is even more surprising. Because ordering the inventory is one problem. Actually getting it across the ocean is another. And this is where the world's most underappreciated machine takes over. Container shipping. Roughly 90% of everything you touch, wear, and use crossed an ocean in a steel box. A single modern container ship, like the Ever Ace or the MSC Gulson class, can carry more than 23,000 containers. Stacked end to end, those containers would stretch for over 140 kilometers. And during the pre-Black Friday season, dozens of these ships arrive at U.S. ports every single week, mostly at Los Angeles, Long Beach, Savannah, and New York and New Jersey. Now here's the strange part. The port itself is not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is what happens after the container leaves the port. Because a container full of televisions arriving in Long Beach on October 1st has to be unloaded, trucked to a rail yard, loaded onto a train, moved across the country, unloaded again, trucked to a distribution center, unloaded again, broken into individual items, and repackaged for individual customers. That entire journey can take between 10 and 20 days if everything works. If anything goes wrong, the timeline collapses, and so does the discount. This is why in 2021, the world briefly got a preview of what a broken Black Friday would look like. Ships waited at anchor off the California coast for weeks. Some retailers panicked and started chartering their own vessels. Home Depot, Costco, Walmart, and Target all quietly rented private ships to bypass congestion. And that was the moment the industry realized something profound. The global supply chain isn't a single machine. It's thousands of small, interconnected machines, and any one of them can bring the entire thing to a stop. Which brings us to the warehouses. Because once the goods arrive, they enter a world most consumers will never see. A modern fulfillment center is not a warehouse in the traditional sense. It's more like a small city built entirely around motion. Amazon's largest fulfillment centers cover more than 3 million square feet, which is roughly the size of 50 football fields laid side by side. Inside, robots roll across the floor at up to 5 miles per hour, carrying entire shelving units toward human pickers who stand at fixed stations. A single facility can hold more than 20 million individual items. During Black Friday, that inventory can turn over in less than 48 hours. Here's what most people never realize. Inside these buildings, products are not stored by category. Toothpaste isn't next to shampoo. Books aren't next to books. Instead, items are stored using what's called chaotic storage, or random stow. A pair of headphones might sit next to a garden hose, which sits next to a bag of dog food, which sits next to a sweater. It looks like nonsense, but it's actually the most efficient storage system ever designed, because the software knows exactly where every single item is. And random storage means the robot fetching your order doesn't have to travel to a distant electronics aisle. It just goes to the nearest shelf that happens to contain what you need. In a facility with millions of items, that saves miles of robot travel every single hour. Multiplied across the Black Friday surge, it saves entire days of processing time. But even with all this automation, the system still runs on people. Because for all the talk of robots, most fulfillment centers still rely on humans to pick, pack, and quality check the actual products. During Black Friday, retailers hire an army of seasonal workers. Amazon brings on roughly 250,000 temporary employees. UPS hires around 100,000. FedEx adds another 60 to 70,000. Walmart, Target, and Kohl's all pull in tens of thousands more. Combined, the seasonal workforce built specifically for the holiday rush exceeds 1 million people in the United States alone. That's more workers than are employed in the entire American coal, steel, and automotive manufacturing industries combined, just to move Christmas presents. And every one of these workers is racing a clock. In a top-tier fulfillment center, a picker is expected to grab an item every 10 to 15 seconds. A packer is expected to close and label a box every 12 to 20 seconds. If they fall behind, the conveyor belt behind them starts to back up. If enough conveyors back up, the entire facility starts to lag. If enough facilities lag, deliveries get delayed. And in the Black Friday window, a delay of even 1 hour can cascade into millions of missed delivery promises. So the software becomes the real conductor of this orchestra. Every scan, Every barcode, every pick, every pack feeds a central system that constantly reallocates work in real time. If one station falls behind, orders are automatically rerouted to another. If a facility is overloaded, orders are reassigned to a facility 500 miles away that has capacity. If a truck is late, its cargo is redirected mid-route to a different sorting hub. Decisions that used to take dispatchers hours are now made by algorithms in milliseconds. This is the invisible nervous system of Black Friday, and it never sleeps. But even this isn't the hardest part, because once the box leaves the fulfillment center, it enters what logistics professionals call the last mile. And the last mile is where nearly all the money, most of the difficulty, and virtually all the customer frustration lives. Here's a number that surprises most people. The last mile, the final stretch from a local delivery station to a customer's door, accounts for roughly 53% of the total shipping cost. Not the ocean crossing, not the cross-country rail, not the massive tractor trailers. It's the final 10 or 15 miles that dominates the economics, because that final leg can't be batched, can't be containerized, and can't be automated the way ocean freight can. A single delivery driver on a Black Friday route might handle 250 stops in a single shift, driving 120 miles, walking almost 10. Each stop involves finding an address, navigating gates and lobbies, sometimes dealing with pets, sometimes dealing with weather, sometimes dealing with the fact that the customer isn't home. Multiply that by hundreds of thousands of drivers across the country, and you begin to understand why last-mile delivery is described inside the industry as the most brutal, unforgiving, and expensive segment of the entire chain. To make this survivable, delivery routes are no longer designed by humans. They're generated by algorithms that consider road conditions, traffic patterns, left turns versus right turns, package weight, package dimensions, apartment building elevator wait times, and even the historical likelihood of the customer being home. UPS famously discovered that eliminating left turns saved millions of gallons of fuel and made routes significantly faster. Amazon's routing system, called Rabbit, produces a customized path for every driver, updated every few minutes based on real-time conditions. But here's the surprising part. Even with all that engineering, Black Friday still exposes the weakest link in the entire system, and it's rarely what people expect. It's the drivers. Because there simply aren't enough of them. The American trucking industry has been running with a persistent shortage of drivers for more than a decade. And during Black Friday, that shortage becomes existential. Retailers compete aggressively for the same limited pool. Some pay signing bonuses, some pay hourly rates 2 or 3 times higher than usual. Some contract out to gig-based platforms like Roadie and DoorDash to fill the gap. Amazon has built an entire parallel network of independent delivery service partners, small businesses that own vans and hire drivers exclusively for Amazon routes, precisely to guarantee capacity during peak weeks. And this is where the story takes another turn. Because to protect Black Friday, retailers have begun to essentially rewrite their operations around the idea that catastrophic surges must be absorbed without warning. This is called elastic infrastructure. It's the same concept that keeps websites from crashing during traffic spikes, applied to physical logistics. Facilities are designed to run at 60 or 70% of maximum capacity year-round, precisely so that they can flex up to 100% for 4 days in November without buckling. That extra capacity costs money, a lot of money. Empty conveyor belts, half-used warehouses, and idle trucks are all expensive. But retailers pay for that idle capacity all year, because the alternative, losing Black Friday, would be catastrophically worse. And this is the paradox at the center of the entire system. Black Friday looks like the moment when demand explodes. But in reality, the entire year is quietly bent around it. The whole calendar of manufacturing, shipping, staffing, warehousing, and delivery is engineered to prepare for those 4 days. In a sense, Black Friday doesn't stress the supply chain. It defines it. It's the reason the modern supply chain looks the way it does. But even the most elastic system has breaking points. And every few years, the world gets a reminder of what happens when they're reached. In 2013, a combination of bad weather and a UPS underestimation of demand caused millions of packages to arrive after Christmas. In 2014, FedEx experienced similar cascading delays. In 2020, during the pandemic, the whole system nearly imploded, and companies quietly stopped promising 2-day delivery for weeks at a time. Every one of these events triggered massive internal investigations, and every one of them changed the design of Black Friday operations going forward. Because these companies now treat Black Friday less like a shopping event and more like a national infrastructure test. FedEx runs internal war games. UPS runs disaster simulations. Amazon runs failure drills, where entire fulfillment centers are pretended to be offline to see if orders can be rerouted in time. The retailers you shop from during Black Friday are, without you realizing it, running the equivalent of military logistics exercises for months in advance. And that leads to the strangest question of all. Why does any of this exist in the first place? Why has an entire global system been built around a single Friday in America? The story begins, oddly enough, in Philadelphia in the 1960s. Police officers used the term Black Friday to describe the chaotic day after Thanksgiving, when suburban shoppers flooded downtown for the Army-Navy football game and holiday sales. It was a headache, not a marketing opportunity. Then in the 1980s, retailers rebranded the phrase. Black Friday, they said, was the day retailers moved from red ink into black ink for the year, the day they became profitable. That framing stuck. Consumers loved it. Retailers realized they could use it to launch the holiday season with a starting gun. From there, the event snowballed into what it is today, a globally coordinated demand surge, aimed at a single calendar date. And that is why the world's logistics networks all quietly bend around it. Because Black Friday isn't just a sale. It's a signal. It tells factories in Vietnam when to start stitching. It tells ports when to expect their heaviest weeks. It tells trucking companies when to hire, when to route, when to reroute. It tells warehouses when to expand, when to flex, when to hold steady. It tells software teams when to freeze code changes, so no update accidentally crashes a system in the middle of the surge. It tells entire industries when to breathe in and when to breathe out. And here's the deepest hidden insight. Black Friday is, quietly, one of the most important stress tests in the modern economy. The way a country handles it reveals almost everything about its infrastructure. Countries with modern ports, dense highways, dependable rail, and mature e-commerce, like the United States, Germany, and South Korea, can absorb the surge. Countries with older systems, weaker logistics, or fragmented delivery networks struggle. In some places, packages ordered on Black Friday still don't arrive until February. That gap between the countries that can absorb Black Friday and the countries that can't isn't just a shopping story. It's an economic story. It maps almost perfectly to modern global trade dominance. The ability to move a small brown box from a factory in Ho Chi Minh City to a doorstep in Cleveland in 17 days, at a discount, without ever failing, is not a small thing. It's one of the greatest logistical achievements in human history. And it exists, in large part, because of Black Friday. Which brings us back to the beginning. To that woman clicking a button on her phone at 3:07 in the morning. She'll never think about any of this. She'll never think about the Vietnamese factory, or the ocean crossing, or the port in Long Beach, or the rail yard in Chicago, or the fulfillment center outside Columbus, or the driver making his 213th stop of the day. She'll just think about the television. 70% off. Delivered on time. And that, in a strange way, is the point. The measure of a great supply chain isn't that you notice how well it works. The measure of a great supply chain is that you don't. It disappears. It becomes invisible. It becomes so smooth, so silent, so reliable, that the human mind stops registering it entirely. Every year, when Black Friday arrives, the world coordinates a logistical operation larger than most military campaigns in human history, involving tens of millions of workers, tens of thousands of vehicles, thousands of warehouses, hundreds of ships, dozens of countries, and a single unspoken promise that the box will arrive. And every year, against every rule of complexity, chaos, and physics, it does. If you enjoyed discovering the incredible stories behind everyday systems, subscribe to the channel and join us for more fascinating deep dives you won't want to miss.